Hello students, today we will learn about the xerophytes in biology, that what are xerophytes, what are the different habitats in which they are found, and what are the main adaptations that makes them unable to survive in their habitats. So students, first of all, if we understand or we see the meaning of the xerophytes, then xerophytes are the plants which grow in xerophytic conditions. Xerophytic conditions, that means the conditions where there is unavailability or very less quantity of water is available for their survival. Just like desert areas where there is very little water is available or nearly no quantity of the water is available. So students, let's see what are the different conditions in which xerophytic conditions are created. So if you see the properties of the xerophytic areas, then first of all the reason come that there is no availability of the water or very less availability of the water, no water availability. Causes of the xerophyticity. Why the xerophytic conditions created? If there is no water. If there is high temperature, then the water present in soil will get evaporate. So the second condition is necessary in xerophytic situation is high temperature. High temperature. Sometimes students, the condition arises that if there is adequate availability of water is there, but even then we call it xerophytic situation. The reason behind is that the available water is not fit for uses of the plants that grow there. And why it happens? Because the water may be too acidic or it may be too saline, too salty. So in this condition we call it physiological dryness of that habitat. So the third one is physiological dryness. In physiological dryness, students, always remember there is adequate availability of water is there, sufficient amount of water is present, but it is unusable for the plants just because of the nature of the water. It may be either too salty, it may be acidic in nature, due course of which the plant cannot absorb or cannot use that water. Next one is, if the soil in that area is sandy or rocky soil, then the water, the rainy water or the groundwater will seep down in such depth that the roots of the plants cannot reach there and it is unavailable for the plants. So the sandy soil or rocky soil may be the reason for this. Sandy or rocky soil may be there. Now if all these conditions are not there, but there is no rainfall or very little or negligible rainfall is there, then it will also create the xerophytic conditions. So it may be a reason for creations of the xerophytic atmosphere, that low precipitation. So students, these are the some reasons why the xerophytic conditions created. Now if we divide the xerophytic conditions or xerophytic areas in different forms, then we can divide it into three categories. So students, let's see the division of the xerophytic situations, xerophytic habitat that which type of xerophytic habitats are there. We can broadly classify the xerophytic habitat into three parts. The first one is physically dry. Physically dry habitat is the habitat in which there is no availability of the water is there. Due course of the high temperature, low rainfall, sandy soil, there may be any reasons that we have seen before, but there is no availability of the water, scarcity of water is there. Second one is physiologically dry. Physiologically dry habitats are the habitats in which there is adequate amount of water is present available, but it is somehow not useful for the plants growing there, just because of the salinity of the water or acidity of the water. The water may be acidic or too salty that roots of the plants cannot absorb them. The third one is physically and physiologically dry. Physically and physiologically dry. As the name suggests that it is the combination of the first and second type of the habitat. There may be unavailability of the water at some places, and at some places there is saline or acidic water is present, due course of which it is not available for the plants. So these are the main three types of the habitat which are found, which are considered to be xerophytic habitats. Now students, let's see the types of the plants that grow in these xeric conditions. Which type of the plants or what are the main adaptive features of the plants that helps them to grow in this type of xeric conditions. So if we classify the plants of the xeric conditions, then they can be divided into three parts. The first one is ephemerals. Ephemerals, or we also say them drought escaping plants or drought escaping plants. Second are succulent. Succulent plants, or we also call them drought resistant plant. Drought resistant plant. And the third type are non-succulent. Non-succulent plants, and we also call them drought enduring plant. Drought enduring plants. Let's understand them one by one, that what are their properties. The first one is ephemeral or drought escaping plant, which escape the drought conditions. These plants, students, have very short lifespan, that they complete their life cycles in a very few days and before 6th to 9th month of the drought conditions. And during the drought conditions, they remains in the form of the seed. Their seed coat is very thick, that saves the embryo from the drought conditions or from the high temperature conditions. So they complete their life cycles during the favorable conditions or the availability of water, or we can say in rainy seasons. Before the drought conditions rises, they produces their seeds again, and remains in inactive form up to the time period when the next rainfall or next favorable conditions created. Second one are succulent or drought resistant plant. In succulent plants, students, they possess the high water storage capacity inside their parenchymatous tissue. Their parenchymatous tissues are of spongy nature that they can store the maximum amount of water that is needed by them. They merely possess the leaves, and their leaves are modified into spines in order to save the water from transpiration. They also possess a property of the green stems, green spongy stem that store the water, as well as it perform the photosynthesis. Instead of leaves, the stem is of green color which possess the chlorophyll and perform the photosynthesis. So, these are drought resistant because they have the water storage capacity in their parenchymatous tissues. So, it resists the drought. If there is no availability of the water, then they uses the water that they stored in their parenchymatous tissues. Next are non-succulent or drought enduring plants. This type of the plant uses very little amount of water. Their need of the water is very little. So, they also possess the water storage in inside their body, but as compared to the succulent plants, their need of the water is very little. They can survive in very little amount of the water. They can tolerate the drought conditions by their physiological, anatomical or morphological adaptations. So, students, these are ephemeral, succulent and non-succulent plants, three types of the plants that are found in xeric conditions, xeric environment. Now, let us see what are the adaptations found in xeric plants in order to survive in xerophytic conditions. So, in general, if you talk, then if there is less availability of the water, then the parts of the plant that use for absorption of waters, that is roots, must be highly developed. So, they can collect the water from the large area inside the soil. So, first of all, they must have well developed roots. If their roots are highly developed, then they can absorb the sufficient amount of the water. Second thing is that they must have some water storage system inside their body, so that during the availability of water, they can absorb the water for further or future uses. So, just like succulent plant that we have seen, they have water storage system inside their body in their parenchyma tissues that can hold the large amount of the water. The next most important adaptive feature of the xerophyte is that they have very small or nearly no leaves in order to prevent the transpiration of the water. They have the stomata just below their leaves, not on the upper surface of the leaves. So, when the stomata get opened in order to exchange of the gases, then water will not transpire. So, the third point is that they possess very small leaves. Leaves are very small or nearly no leaves to avoid transpiration. because transpiration is the main method to lose the water. Next adaptation that is found in these plants is suppress the high use of the water. They do not use the high amount of water for their morphological activities, they use only a little amount of water. The fourth one is minimize the use of water. So these are the general adaptive features of the